Welcome to the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. Craig A. Brockman is the author of Dead of November, a novel of Lake Superior, and the middle grade novel Marty and the Far Woodchuck. He has been a regular contributor to the U.P. Reader and other publications. In 2017, an article in the Ontonagon Herald chronicled the final 140 miles of his meandering 450-mile hike across the entire UP, from the dock at Detour Village to a sandbar in the mouth of the Montreal River. Craig currently lives with his wife in Tecumseh, Michigan.
So, without any further ado, I want to introduce Craig A. Brockman, who is, yes, the author of Dead of November. And I don't know the rest of you, but I thought it was, oh my gosh, it was great. For this time of year, it was just the perfect choice. I don't know how your weather is, but it's been rainy and yucky all day. It's just the perfect day to talk about this book. So, Craig, share with us.
Okay. Everything okay? Am I here?
You're there.
Up and at 'em. Yeah, let me pull up my screen here if I can. I think I'm over here. All right. Can you see that? Okay. Am I clear, Evelyn? I'm coming through, right?
I muted myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're obedient. You're just being obedient, right?
I was being obedient. Yes, you're very clear. So if everybody,
okay, all right, let's get this show on the road. Yeah, if you can, I put a couple of little housekeeping here. If you see that little microphone icon down there, if you just could shut that off, because if your chair creaks or something, your face is going to come up, and we're not going to be sure if that's a creaking chair or what it is. So just mute, please. The other thing is, if you could, if you want to chat, if you want to ask a question, there's a chat icon on the bottom. If you click on that, there should be a drop-down menu. Wait a minute, let me get a pointer here. There should be a drop-down menu here that says everyone. If you click on that, I think Evelyn and Victor, they should be on that list. And then you can send them a message, just type in there and send them a question, and then they can ask me as we go along. If you have anything more urgent, and you want to raise your hand and ask a question, just look at those on the bottom, and it says reactions. Click on that. It says raise your hand, and I think, Evelyn, you can see that, I think. And right, and then you can just click on that and raise your hand, and then Evelyn can butt in. I don't care if you interrupt. I have about 25 minutes or half an hour. I think I've got it. And then I hope we have some time that we can just talk, and I can answer any questions that you have, or you can kick in anything that you're thinking about. If you want to ask me, how come I did this, or this, tell me that doesn't make sense, or I've been to this place and it doesn't seem like anything like that. Or if you want to talk about ghosts, that's good too. So, well, I hope we have fun. I hope that this time rolls on. What I'm going to give you here is kind of like a behind the scenes, like if you go see a movie behind the scenes, that's kind of what I'm doing with this. I used a bunch of images for my book, Dead of November. And I did some different things, and I'll just kind of click through some of those things that I had stored. And I hope that it's interesting for you if you read the book. If you haven't read the book, I hope I don't have too many spoilers in it. And I hope it encourages you to give it a read. I just reread it myself about 2 weeks ago. I hadn't actually read it for about 2.5 years because it's quite a process from that time. And it was so much fun to go back to that world and revisit those characters and get acquainted with them. It's just like old friends. And I'd forgotten a lot of the scenes and some of the things that developed in the book. And it was so much fun to go back and read it again and enter that world. It took me probably 5 years to write the book. I'd had it in my head for 10 years or so. And finally I put it together and finished it up. I started back in, sorry. Can you see these notes? Apparently you can see these notes, huh? Maybe I better just go full screen. Evelyn, can you tell me if I'm on full screen or where I'm at with this?
Right now, I can see your notes.
Okay, let me try a different.
Now I just see you.
Okay, well, that's not good. Let's try this here. I'll see if I can remember. I'll try to remember my notes and just wing it. So
Okay.
let me see what I can do. So that should be a full screen now, right?
Oh, yes, yes, very good.
Okay, and then here we go. Yeah, bio. I guess I started out graduate. I grew up in Wisconsin. Went to college at Oshkosh, University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. I was a family nurse practitioner, graduated my master's in primary care. And I always had an interest in Native Americans because I grew up surrounded by a Winnebago, now they're called Ho-Chunk, settlement in central Wisconsin. But I went right into the Indian Health Service, went to the reservation in Red Lake, Minnesota. Way up north in Minnesota. We were there for a year and then transferred to the Sioux. While I was there, it was like spent time mostly in Sault Ste. Marie, Bay Mills, Manistee, Munising, at the different Native clinics, and even on Mackinac Island did some physicals and stuff. But that was kind of my career in the 20 years or so that we were up in the UP. This is actually, it's not very common that you actually get to see the moment of inspiration that launches a novel. Now, this isn't going to be an hour of grandparent slides, but sort of. These are my two granddaughters. This was about 10 years ago, actually. Naomi's 21 now, and Micaiah's 18. She's over in Germany. And Naomi's just about to graduate with her degree in airline mechanics. But anyway, bragging aside, then the two girls, Sally, my wife, and I took them up to the UP for a week. And this is the Shallows, that starts out the prologue of the book, be south of Paradise. And we were at the Shallows, and you can, let me see if I can bring up. All right. Yeah, I thought I could, oh, there it is, pointer. And okay, now you can see that pointer. And right about here is where that sandbar emerges some years, and you can kind of walk out there and you can spend the whole day on this big sandbar. Just a beautiful beach, the Shallows. And then actually you get past that sandbar and it gets pretty deep. But scattered all around there, if you can see this little dot above Micaiah's head, that's a rock out there. And there's all these rocks that are kind of scattered at the Shallows. And while I was standing there, we could see the storm coming. The storm was coming up behind us, and the storm was coming up behind us, and it was lightning, scary, and we had a heck of a time getting the girls out of the water, of course. And I just felt that tension. I thought, wow, that'd be a cool place to start a book. And I just imagined, what if somebody was sitting on that stone, and that gave me the idea of the ghosts coming out of Lake Superior, leaving Lake Superior. And I thought, what if somebody had been sitting out there on that stone the whole time we had been there? So this photograph was almost like the moment of inspiration that I started the book. This was the early synopsis that I used. This is Scrivener. It's a writing tool. And I kind of, there's different ones, but I like Scrivener to start things off, and then I transfer things into Word. But with Scrivener, you can kind of lay out all the chapters. This was the earliest synopsis that I had, where it says, something is forcing spirits of the drowned to flee Lake Superior. Psychologist is called upon to return to Michigan's Upper Peninsula to help with those affected by the growing hysteria caused by these sightings. He has another motive for returning, to find resolution for the grief he has carried in the years since his wife went missing in these same cold, deep waters. He uncovers a dream world controlled by forces older than the ancient people who have inhabited the land, and he must stop a conjuring that will release an unspeakable evil from the lake. That's pretty close to what it ended up being. I really had no intention of having anything Native American in it. I wanted to try to avoid that because it seemed kind of cliche, but I just couldn't help it. It just kind of worked into the story as things, as we went along. This is another view of Scrivener. how that lays out. So I wrote vignettes, it's kind of like, what did I want to see? And when you think about what do you want to see in a ghost story about Lake Superior? So I would write these vignettes, and writers call them scenes, but I thought of them as vignettes. And there's a couple of them that I wrote really early, like Cam in the cabin, and things like that. And the drive, the final climactic drive up to the point that I actually was visiting up in the UP, staying in a cabin, writing this, and I had a handheld a few years ago, one of those handheld digital recorders, and I drove from Sault Ste. Marie up to the point at night when it was windy and just recorded my thoughts, what it would be like, how spooky that was going along Curly Lewis Highway there by the Shallows. So, and then I kind of transferred that into that final scene. But Scrivener is really cool because you can lay out you can move these chapters around, you can mix and match them. And then down here, there's kind of a research bucket where I kept my research as I moved along through the house, through the building. I use an iPad with a split screen. I have a little Bluetooth keyboard that I attach to that. And with a split screen, I can write over here, keep my research there and just write away. And like, this is the mansion. I could just be walking through the mansion while I was writing at the same time. This is, I have a bunch of images because I was a singer-songwriter back in the day. And so my writing kind of merged from lyrics and songwriting. And so to write lyrics, you have to be real concise. You have to be able to lay character, scene, ambience, and everything in just a phrase or a couple of lines. And so I think real visually, and like my songs were like photographs, and good lyrics are kind of like put photographs or put images into your mind. And that's I like using images when I'm writing and bring them up. And same with music. When I was writing about being on the water, I was using the soundtrack from the Titanic and stuff like that. So you get that water kind of sense. This is actually in Sault Ste. Marie. It's on Water Street, right across from Brady Park. This is what used to be a bed and breakfast, and it's not anymore. And when I was working at the clinic there, we had a meeting here, and then my wife and I went back, and she gave us a tour. The woman gave us a tour of the place. It's really beautiful Airbnb or bed and breakfast. And ironically, right next to this brick building right next to it is the oldest building in Sault Ste. Marie. And it's actually a private residence. But you kind of put those two together, and I kind of have the idea that infirmary next to the old inn. The other thing that's really cool that people don't realize is that there actually is an old infirmary in Sault Ste. Marie that is an apartment building, and people don't even realize that they're living in an old infirmary from the Fort Grady. I can't completely vouch for this, but when we lived there, we used to go by this. But one of these was part of an old hospital, is either an old hospital, or the infirmary, because they're really old. And I just thought it was really spooky to think that you had an apartment in an old infirmary. So I moved, in my book, I moved the infirmary next to the inn to make it kind of weird. But some people thought it's just implausible. Why do you have that weird infirmary right in the middle of the town? But actually it's there. It's right by the courthouse in Sault Ste. Marie. Other images. Again, like I said, I like images. And so all I did here was just Google a mansion in the snow, because I wanted a certain look for that inn. And so I Googled the mansion in the snow, and I just went through a whole bunch of these thumbnails. That's why they're kind of grainy, and that some of these are just thumbnails. I went through all these mansions in the snow, and this is the one that I modeled the mansion in the book after. You see this huge porch, the side with all the light, coming in on the side, and the 3 stories with the spire here. This is what I imagined the inn to look like. I also did this. This is kind of, again, I just Googled this, and a porch in the snow. And this is the image that I used when I drew the porch, the front porch where Adam first arrives in that early November snow and walks up to the porch. It just has that warm kind of embracing attitude. I also had other photos that I used to draw the inn. This is actually the floor plan of the inn. All I did is Google mansion floor plans, and I came up with these. This is the one that seemed to be the closest to what I wanted to use. And you can actually walk in here. Here's the drawing room. Here's the library. Go through these doors, down the hallway, kitchen's way here, down here. Here's the servant stairs, and then the second floor going upstairs. So this is, I finally found this floor plan. This is actually from, I think it's called the Albert Cluett House in Troy, yeah, New York. And it doesn't look anything at all like the mansion I was imagining, but the floor plan works. So it's a cool thing for writing now. You can just Google this stuff and be able to, and with using the Scrivener, you can have it right there. So you're writing right off of a page like that. This interior just kills me because this, we were actually there. This is the Hegler Charis mansion in LaSalle, Illinois. And when we go back to Wisconsin, Star Rock is near LaSalle, Illinois, west of Chicago. And we stay out at the inn at Starved Rock is kind of like Pokagon, if you've been to, or some of these big inns that were built during the CCC era. We stay there, and then we toured this mansion. And this isn't the thing that's cool about this is that mansion is a preservation. It's not a restoration. So it's just the way they found it, basically. So you walk through this, the ambience in here is just amazing with the chip ceilings and everything else. And if you look it up online, Hegler Charis Mansion, there's a lot of other pictures of the interior, but it's an amazing place to walk through. And this was the photo that I used for the front entry, that long hallway. And like right to the right is would be the library, or the sitting room, and then the library, and then stairs going up in the dark. But this is kind of what I imagine the inside of the inn to look like. This is what that place, Hegler Charis, actually looks like. And I thought about using that initially for the inn, but it just looked too cliche, ghost story house, and it just looked too cold, and I wanted a place that looked kind of warm and inviting. This is the the research vessel Key, and this is actually on Lake Superior, and some of you may have seen this. It's out of Ashland, Wisconsin, and it plies the lake doing research. This is what was my inspiration for Ron Jarvin's Samantha, his niece, where she's interned on this ship. You can see, you can walk up here and in the cabin, and this is the winch of terror at the back of the ship. And but this is this is Key. I called it the kite in the book, but this, you can, if you go on YouTube and put RV Key YouTube video, there's a really cool, about 15 or 20 minute video that shows you the day-to-day life on this research vessel. So I really learned a lot. I consulted a lot with, there's a friend of ours, actually it was my son's friend when he was in high school in Brimley. But this guy is a native fisherman, and now I think he works for the state fisheries. He helped me a lot with some of the research vessel stuff, and like with the ships and with boating, because I know nothing about that stuff. But he helped me, like there's a chapter where this Danny Sales character gets in the boat and he goes up north with on his drunk up north, and I had asked Skip, that was the friend of ours, how long would it take to go from Sault Ste. Marie up there? Could you do that in a day? And would you do that in November? And those kinds of questions. So I had people like that to consult with. I had the Scottish woman, Maggie Stewart, was actually modeled after a friend of ours that lives up there by Kinross. And I called her up. I called her up and I said, I'm sorry that if you're offended, I used your name for Maggie Stewart for a book, and the character kind of reminded me of you. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. My name was Maggie Cooper when I was growing up. And so at least I didn't have to get worried about being sued by Maggie Stewart for using her name. So, but a lot of stuff, weird little stuff like that happens. I had, for the native stuff, I consulted with a woman named Wanda Perrin. I actually saw her family when I worked for Indian Health Service. I saw her kids and stuff, but Wanda became, actually her daughter is a friend of our daughter's and hung out together. And Wanda gave me the idea, the bear walk and some of those things. But she dropped a lot of really cool native lore stuff that I could use, and was a good consultant in building some of the native lore stuff. So there are a couple of people like that. I knew the security guard at the Bay Mills Casino, and he helped me with some of the casino stuff. So you don't realize going into a book that you're going to make connections with all these people. You know, that was one of the neatest discoveries, was that writing a book means creating connections, you know, and that was awesome. It still is, you know. This is just the layout that I used for the ship, because I knew nothing about how ships were or how tight these quarters are down below. And so I needed a little map of how to write being on a ship. This was really cool. It was called the Anchorman and Charis, were two ships that sunk in November 24th, 1918. And they were actually built in Fort Williams, Ontario. And the French had commissioned these three, actually there were three ships. They sent French sailors over to get the ships. They launched from Fort Williams, Ontario in 1918. And two of the ships, the Anchorman and the Charis, sunk, and all 76 of the men were lost. The sailors and two Canadians were lost. So these are, I had no idea what French sailors would look like in 1918. So I Googled that, and they're the ghosts in Jan Jarvin, the guy that lives on the North Shore. And so I used these figures to draw those ghosts of the French sailors. So some people thought, oh, well, how do you have French sailors on Lake Superior? But that actually did with the sinking of that ship. I was writing that chapter with him, Jan Jarvin, carving in that dark den, and my daughter or granddaughter does French, and she's really into French songs like the old torch singers and stuff. And my wife was listening to those on the other end of the house, and it was kind of streaming through the house. And I, while I was typing, I thought, wow, that would be perfect to introduce that music into this book to give it so much more ambience. And so setting that French music in the background gave me the idea to bring in the sailors from the Anchorman and Charis. And so that's how that chapter was created as a vignette, and kind of almost standalone chapter too. So again, behind the scenes stuff. So my Google skills increased tremendously while I was here. So I had a couple of characters that I had a little bit of a hard time getting my head around. I had to see them. And so believe it or not, I just put the name of the character in and Googled them. And so I wanted to see who would come up or what would come up. And this guy, I put in Ron Jarvin. I thought, what would a Ron Jarvin look like? You can even see the Ron here on his Home Depot apron. But he had the eyes of the character, the Ron Jarvin character in the book, I thought. He has that kind of sadness and sincerity, except the Ron Jarvin is probably a little thinner maybe and has a beard and longer hair. But I used this guy when I was writing about Ron Jarvin. So that was kind of a trick, was actually look up people. The other person I had a little bit trouble getting a vision on was Gracie Bird, who probably is my favorite character in the book. And this is the person I used for Gracie Bird. Again, I just Googled young Native American woman because I needed somebody. I had somebody for Julie, Adam's wife. I knew somebody up there that I kind of modeled her after, but I didn't have a good sound because Gracie Bird doesn't come out in the book, but she's actually biracial. And if I develop this theme a little further, there's a reason why she's biracial. And so I needed somebody with this sort of mischievous look in her eyes and this kind of mystery. And when I wrote about Gracie, this is the person that I was kind of thinking about. So that's Gracie Bird. The other thing with Gracie Bird is her name actually comes from Zikala Sa, who's Redbird. She's an amazing woman in her own right. Gertrude Simmons Bonner was her Christian name. She lived from 1876 to 1938. If you get a chance to look her up, she's incredible. She was a composer. She wrote the first native, so first native to write a concert. She was a writer, she was a speaker, an activist, an amazing woman in her own right. And if you get a chance to look up Redbird, just do a little background on her. And but I named Gracie Bird in honor of Redbird, so that's kind of cool. Okay, this is actually Agua Rock. I'd like to know in discussion time if anybody else has ever been out there. I think it's open now. It's in Canada. It's about an hour and a half or 2 hours north of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And it's somebody I talked to before COVID, they said it was still open. I thought it had been closed down because a couple of people have drowned off here, been washed off there by waves. They used to have railings here, but then the railings were taken down and were broke by ice. But I thought it was closed down, but somebody said it might be open again. But this is Agua Rock. That was the inspiration for James Graves and for the Great Lynx. There actually is that crevice where you walk down through it that I mentioned in the book. The lore says that this was split open by the tail of Mitsupeshu, the Great Lynx, and but it's really eerie to walk down through this really deep rock cavern, and then eventually you come out to where the pictographs are. This one always fascinated me. We had been there. We went up there a couple of times when we lived over there. But this is Mitsupeshu mentioned in the book, and I just think it probably was painted on there. They think maybe as far long as 500 years ago by Miengan. Maybe a couple of these may be only like a couple hundred years old. They have never really figured out what the paint is or how they got the stuff to stick on there. But the creature alone is amazing when you think about 500 years ago. Why would he put these big horns on? Maybe buffalo horns wasn't his inspiration, because he has ears, so it's not the pointed lynx ears. And the other thing I was fascinated me even more was the spines down the back. They didn't, this would have been hundreds of years before the first dinosaur skeletons were discovered or anything, and there was no creatures other than a snapping turtle in the wild that would have these spines down the back. So I think it's an amazing mythological creature, and I don't know if we'll ever understand where this came from. But I was always fascinated with Mitsupeshu, and that's why I worked the creature into the book. Oh yeah, I found this picture about last year. I think it's a National Geographic. This is a picture that they took of leopards that dive for fish. And I didn't know that leopards dove for fish, but they said that cougars may do that too. But this look on the face, and I just thought the fact that Native people lived with wild animals and the threat of actually being attacked and eaten. I put a little shaman down here sinking into the deeps of the water. And this, imagine that giant lynx and why that, because when you conceptualize it at first, you think, well, that's kind of a weird mythological creature, a giant wildcat. But when you think of the horror and what the Native people, how they would have conceptualized cougars and stuff at that time, and lynx, I guess it kind of makes sense. And this creature certainly looks that evil. So I think that's about all that I had. Good, used up about a half an hour like I thought I would. But I really hope that you guys enjoyed the book. If you haven't read it yet, hope you can dig into it, because it's kind of a cool trip. I'm kind of right now. I finished another book, but it's a kind of a detour spiritually, and it's about it's about Lazarus that was risen from the dead, and I just was inspired kind of by Anne Rice's vampire books, and how the vampires long for mortality. And so I thought, well, flip that, and from a kind of a Christian perspective, what if Lazarus didn't die again, but went on living for centuries? So I wrote that book, and I'm kind of had Tyler edit it, Tyler Tischler. did a great job, and but I struggle a little bit with the organization of it and stuff. So I'm working with a developmental editor a little bit, and so I'll back up for a few months and probably restart it again. So that book's done. It's about 400 pages, and then I've just started another one that's actually a prequel. I think if I can get it off the ground, but I've got about 7,000 words. I for the UP Reader, I wrote a short story called A Fairy and Berry Can, and actually wove Dwayne, Gracie Bird's brother, into that short story. And so what I'm doing with this other book is a prequel to Dead in November, and it actually talks about where Dwayne and Gracie came from. It introduces Gracie's mother, the White Doe, and goes into how she died and that whole thing. And so it's kind of more of a childhood view of Dwayne and Gracie. And then I'm trying to work it almost, the kind of like a Stand By Me or that kind of a thing, with a more of a not I don't want a middle grader or a young adult book, but it's through a child's point of view, but like Dead in November, it uses a lot of dream and fantasy and that kind of stuff. So that's the one I'm working on now, and I hope to have that done by next year. But things are kind of moving ahead on that, happy to say. So that's my thing. See ya. Bye. Okay. Any questions? Anything else that anybody? I'm going to stop my share here.
Yeah, share.
Done.
Wow. Well, I have questions, but does anyone else have any questions first?
I was really excited when I saw LaSalle, Illinois.
Oh, right.
I grew up. I grew up right in that area, and I've been to Starved Rock many times and heard the story of the tribes and how they starved them out on the rock. And
yeah, Starved Rock is amazing because it's got all those. If you go stay, we stay at the lodge. The lodge is beautiful, and they have cabins and that there too. And it's not actually, I don't know, it's probably about 4 hours from here, 5 hours. And then, but for us going back to Wisconsin, it's a halfway point. But there's hiking there where you go to these amazing waterfalls and through these huge canyons. Nobody realized that in the middle of Illinois is all this splendor. And then LaSalle is really cool too. It's a really neat old town. And the Hegler
I actually lived in Ottawa, and so LaSalle and Ottawa were big football rivals. But it was kind of ironic because I lived in Ottawa, Illinois when I was growing up, and then I lived in Tawas, Michigan for 19 years, and both of those are named for the same Indian tribe.
Oh, really?
The Odawa. Yeah. Like, okay, I guess that's part of me somehow.
Yeah. Go back.
Yeah.
Tawas is great. Tawas is one of our vacation destinations. I like to go up there. There's cabins up there that are good to rent for writing. So I like Tawas area is one of our favorite. It's beautiful. Yeah, I was up there just last spring. I spent a few days up there writing. So yep.
Yeah. Laura wrote here in the chat, well, what are you working on now? And I think
that's all. That prequel, like I said, that's the one I'm just getting into now, but I'm doing a pretty deep, another once over of this, the Lazarus book, I call it Curve of the Earth. I'm doing kind of a deep once over on that again to try to rethink the characters and the settings a little bit and put a little bit more emotionality into it. What I did, nobody wants to read a memoir about an old guy, except Larry Bougie just released one that looks spectacular. He's a UPPAA member. But so I never wanted to write a memoir, but over the years I've journaled a lot, and so I wanted to get these ideas in there. So I take this character Lazarus and kind of put a bunch of my ideas on this Lazarus guy and have him living for like 6 or 7 centuries, going through wars and battles and all kinds of things and struggles and strife and losing his faith and that kind of stuff. So that one, that one I really want to get right. And Dead in November was a good, really fun as far as learning the process of novel writing and how to improve on that. But the one that the Dead in November is really, or I mean, Curve of the Earth, this next one really has to be laid out well. The one I'm excited, as soon as I get done with that, I'm going to hand that over to the developmental editor at the end of this month, and she'll work on that for a couple months, month or so. But then I can dig into the prequel to Dead in November, and that's the one I'm really excited about, because that one deals just, you get like, for Dead in November was so much research, and this Lazarus one was just an amazing, you know, I had to know everything about the Mediterranean for the first 4 or 5 centuries, and then he travels in Europe and Ireland and Egypt, and this Lazarus character kind of really gets around. And so it took me months and months of research to build this whole world. And there's kind of a fantasy element to it, with some immortals that are pursuing him and stuff. And so it gets pretty complex. So I want a book where I can just write for fun. And the prequel to Dead in November will be just more of a fun kind of fantasy with kids involved. I really like kids. So, and I like that perspective. So
I have sort of a specific question about the book, and maybe again, like maybe this was just me not reading it like I should have, but could you talk a little bit about why was it Adam burned Cam's house down? I felt that was a little much. I don't know.
Yeah, good point. I thought it was complete. Yeah, it was like out of character for Adam, you know, and I think that he was just so. I think he was so over Cam because Cam had an affair with his wife, you know, and so he was so upset that he just wanted to strike out at Cam. I guess that's how I saw it. And so he went in there and he was like done with Cam. He was done with his wife, Julie, in a way. He was just sick of it. And so he just put the note on the bed and burned it. He was done with it. So.
Because I actually had to reread it. Like, am I reading this? Like, it just didn't seem like something he would do, you know? So I don't know, but that's good. It kept me on my toes.
No, I appreciate it, because I think there may be a point. There's some things like I said, I just reread it now, and there's a couple of things I would tweak, I think, if I did another edition, you know, and some things like, because especially being my first adult novel, I had really good beta readers, really some native people and some that read the whole thing. And so I had really good beta readers for this one. And so they really helped me to get my thoughts on paper, you know, and that was the problem that I had, is that I had it in my head the way it should work, but I didn't know that I wasn't saying it. Just like that example that you're giving is like, why would that seems out of character to Adam to do something like that, but he's kind of desperate and he's just like completely used up. It's like, I think after that he drives by the casino in Bay Mills and it's just like, nothing to see here, I'm done, you know. Just the TV cameras have showed up, or the news cameras have showed up and stuff like that, and he's just said, I'm done, I don't want anything to do with it anymore. So, and he just kind of
on the other hand, I didn't see it as out of character, because it kind of had been building through the whole book, you know, the angst that he was going through. And when he learned the truth, it was sort of like something just let loose. And so for me, it seemed like, I mean, yeah, it was way over the top for his normal personality, but he was experiencing something that he never expected, you know, and to find out that, you know, his wife had actually really committed suicide. And and I've, you know, dealt with some of those issues, you know, in our family before. So to me, it seemed logical to me. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird.
I know, because the book deals with death and loss. And I know that at that moment, again, being a nurse practitioner, it was like I had, you know, thousands of, probably saw 20,000 patients in my career. And so I had a lot of those moments where you're talking and counseling, you know, even that opening scene, that one scene where Adam is counseling the woman where her granddaughter had died in her home. That was from an experience I actually had in counseling somebody. And I wrote that from that experience. And so that death and loss was kind of really at the top my thinking. And when somebody commits suicide, you really feel betrayed, you know. And I think that I wanted to kind of express that initially, is that Adam felt betrayed, you know, that because Julie quit, you know, and she wasn't the kind of person that would normally quit, and she quit. So but I don't know, all that stuff is just riled up. I didn't want it to be clean, you know. I didn't want it to be just, oh, everything's resolved, you know. Now I have closure. I didn't want any place in the book where he had closure, you know. I wanted it just to end the way that those things really end, you know, just ugly.
Yeah, it's a book that I'm working on right now. Someone was talking about how there wasn't closure, and I'm like, but life doesn't always have closure.
Oh, really?
You know, so yeah, I guess I could relate to you there.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question about this. Now, people who drowned came out of the lake, but then it seemed like the lake was going to turn over, and I sort of got the idea they came out because the lake was gonna, and I think every year lakes turn over. The top goes to the bottom.
Yeah.
So, and I think that had to do with all the different colors and stuff at the end, and that was all going on, and then, but there's like, would these people go back into the lake? Would these ghosts like go back into the lake when it was over?
Yeah, I thought of it more that no, they're done. You know, I guess when I first started this first seeds of putting that idea together, I actually looked around and I realized that every continent really does have a Great Lake, you know, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then, so I got the idea that each Great Lake is like a repository of evil. And so all this evil is being dumped into this Great Lake until it finally like bursts. You know, it's kind of crazy idea, but it kind of bursts and explodes and releases all this evil. And the evil is almost like penance or something. And the evil is atoned, you know, and wiped clean. And so I thought of the evil as growing and growing, you know, and the Mitsubishi, the Great Lakes, was almost like just a manifestation of all the turmoil that was going on. The Mitsubishi just kind of emerged. He wasn't really the turmoil. He was more or less just a symptom of what's going on. This evil was getting ready to dump out of the lake, and it just, you know, burst like a big pimple, I guess. And so, but I thought, can I use those other, you know, I made up those other examples about Lake Baikal in Russia and stuff like that, going through a similar process where all this evil is being dumped into the lake and then explodes out. I just thought it was a cool way. I needed some device to get those ghosts out of the lake. And so that evil kind of, just the evil growing, I guess, is what I was thinking, was expelling the ghosts from the lake. So that's but you would be amazed, you know, if you have like 12 beta readers, and it's like you're going along, and it's just like, how did you get that idea that this, you know, that this happened in that way? I didn't mean that at all, you know. But it's not wrong. It's just, it's really fun to see that people, even though you intended a novel to go a certain way, that they found their own path through it. I think that's kind of fun, you know. And I think that's one of the fun things about being a reader versus a writer. You know, a reader, it's your book when you're reading it. You can do whatever you want. So yeah.
I think that's why I like reading more than going to the movies.
Yeah, I know, because you can create your own path, you know. Yeah.
I like what you said about creating these characters. It reminds me of years and years ago when I was teaching English, that was an assignment that I used to do, is I would bring in these great big phone books, and I would have them pick a name out of the phone book and then make a character. And I've always wanted to meet the man who used to live around here named Weewaho. He must have been an Asian guy, but every class would find him. Everybody wrote about Weewaho, and I wanted to see, you know, what he was really like, because there was so many different. So, but it was neat to see, I think, all of your inspiration. We haven't seen that yet in our Zoom meetings, so that was good. I enjoyed that.
Oh yeah.
Craig, I've got a question. Towards the end of the book, you've got kind of a Indian Bureau of Investigation or something like that. That seemed like an interesting idea.
Oh, muted. Craig, you're muted.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I'm back. Yeah, I don't know how I came up with that. I just, I wanted to go deep, you know, like when I showed you that synopsis, I wanted something that was before the you know, because people don't realize that the natives were like fluid on the continent, you know, and it was like the Menominees used to be in the Menominees used to be the people around Sault Ste. Marie, and then the Ojibwe came and pushed them out, and then the Ojibwe were in Sault Ste. Marie, so the Menominees had to go somewhere else. They went to Wisconsin. So there's always that movement, and that I guess that's kind of what I was thinking about. So, what was your question again? Come back to it again. I got distracted. I'm sorry.
Mainly it was, you have kind of an Indian Bureau of
I'm
Investigation.
sorry. Yeah. So I wanted it to be older than something going on that was older than the native population as there now. So I wanted it to be kind of, yeah, just, they were like the protectors of the lake, you know, they're like ancient, you know, and that's kind of what I was thinking about. Ron Jarvin was kind of like the, he was kind of like the historian, you might say, of Lake Superior and of lakes. And then this native group was kind of like designed to be the protectors. And I think it would be a cool idea because Gracie Bird was my favorite character in the book. And if I wrote a sequel, I'd write it about her, you know, something where that, like you said, because I think that the whatever native FBI or whatever it was would be an interesting thing to carry a little bit further. I think you could get awfully deep with that idea. So I once had an idea for where Sally and I, or my wife, were walking in the woods close by here, and we found a piece of coal and laying in the woods. But around Tecumseh, there's all these old old lumber places and everything else, and it's just kind of weird. And I got an idea: what if the Native Americans had discovered all these resources in the United States, like coal and copper, and made gunpowder and everything else, and almost had like a steampunk society by the time Columbus landed, and they blew them out of the water with cannons, and so they could even have balloons or air flight and everything else, and that the native population, because the Native American continent, this continent was so isolated from the rest of the world, anything could have been happening in the meantime. So, but that was a crazy idea, and that kind of takes that private native thing to another level, I guess. So anyway.
Tyler had a question. I don't know.
Yeah, Craig, well, first, I really enjoyed seeing how you came up with inspiration for the characters and like how you went out looking for photos, which I've never done myself, but I think well, I write lots of historical stuff, so I usually know what some of my characters look like, but I found that really interesting. But my question is, I know you consulted a lot of Native Americans in writing the book, but I'm wondering what kind of response you got from Native Americans, and also just kind of what have been some of the more surprising responses you've gotten to the book?
Yeah, good question. Wanda, I mentioned Wanda Perrin, and they go way back to, we probably have known them, wow, well, Katie, yeah, about 30 years almost. And so, like I said, I saw the kids when I was a nurse practitioner, and then Katie was a friend of my daughter's. And so Katie now is the school principal at Fenton, and she was the dean at Bay Mills College too for a while. So she was one of my beta readers and picked up on that. And so I had her mom and dad read it, or I didn't ask for it, but she wanted her mom to read it because it had the native culture in it. And so they took the book, they took the manuscript, and they started reading it when they left Katie's, which is in Fenton, and Wanda read the whole thing out loud to Mike, her husband, on the way back, and they sat in the car outside their house and read the rest of it aloud before they went in the house. And so they couldn't stop reading it. And so, and that's, I don't know why, but that's the response I've gotten from almost every Native person that's read it. They really were engaged by it, because I tried to make, the thing I wanted to avoid was this perspective of Native people as being like some kind of sacred, untouchable, mystical people. I wanted them to be regular people who had this kind of profound background. And I think the native people were pretty natural in the book. Like the Skip, the guy the ghost guy, or in the dream that's piloting the ship, the boat early on in the book after the snowstorm. He was a real person that we knew too, and was based on him. So he was, all the little native mannerisms, like pointing. Natives always point with their lips and stuff like that. I try to include those things. Like if you ask native, well, where's the store? They point with their lips and stuff. And so Katie, a friend of ours, was reading it. She had scribbled in the margin, make them point with their lips, make them point with their lips. And then she read further in the manuscript, and I had included that in where the native guy pointed with his lips. And so there's little native mannerisms and stuff that I included in it. Again, like I said, I grew up with Winnebago people. I'm not native, but it's always been just the culture and the people and that have always really fascinated me. And we have a lot of good friends that are native up in the UP yet. So I don't know, does that answer the question? I got it. So the response has been really positive from native people, and a lot of people have friended me on Facebook and continued to follow me and give me a thumbs up and stuff once in a while on stuff. So I've been really impressed. And there's a couple of native people, a couple of native women now I'm trying to push to keep writing. They just do some awesome blog stuff, but they're just not pushing themselves to write. So there's a lot of talent out there.
Wow. Well, we're nearing the end of our hour. Any final comments or questions? I think, Craig, it's been fascinating. That Scrivener is so exciting. The way you can, I liked seeing the floor plans. That was really fun.
Good.
And
I learned a lot as an author from that. I'm going to friend you on Facebook.
Yeah, good. Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, no, the Facebook has been awesome. I just did everything I could to resist social media for so long, but it's just indispensable, I think, for authors in particular. My son is a music producer, and he lives in social media too. And if you're just this day and age, if you're in any kind of art, you have to do this social media stuff, and it's fun, and I think if you're smart about it, you can have an awful good time and make some good connections with it. I really like it. So
that's
so quick on the politics.
Writing a book means creating connections. That's well said.
It really is, and I when I think of the UPPAA, these are friends now, like Victor and Larry and Michael Clausen and people like that. I finally met him Michael and Larry in September, and it's like, we've known each other forever, right? No, it's like we only seen each other on Zoom, so, but yeah, those connections are just really important. And I'd never dreamed that writing is about connections, and that's really, really important. So
thank you very, very much. And I will email everybody the recording tomorrow, and I will put on their information about how to get next month's book, which is going to be quite a change, going from Tyler's biography to a novel, a paranormal novel, to a little history on hockey. So we are definitely well-rounded. All right.
Thanks for everything.
Craig.
thank you.
You've been watching the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. To join or for more information, please visit us at www.upa.org or www.upnotable.com.